Thank you so much for joining me today. We will start with your Berlin memory. You lived in Berlin-Dahlem for quite a while, together with your family. What is your memory of the city of Berlin?
Berlin, the memories are not fond because Berlin was destroyed. The Allies had come in and did a pretty good job. And the first assignment that I had was to set up an office and put together a crew of investigators to find out who had committed what crimes. And the office that I was given was in the Harnack house, which had been bombed out. And I said, what the heck? I can't run an office with a bombed out place here. So I found out who was the commanding general. I called him up and I said, look, I'm here on orders of the President of the United States. We're launching a new war crimes program. I can't do that in this place. Send somebody down here. We got to get me a proper office. So my introduction to Berlin was quite chaotic, I would say. But I was plenty busy just getting in and getting out because my function there was to see if there's any evidence that I could use of war crimes having been committed and by people who might be in custody. Set up the office in Berlin then. The United States had decided, in addition to the International Military Tribunal, which consisted of the Russians, the French, and the British and the Americans. It was called the International Military Tribunal. The Russians said, why are you asking them questions? We know what they did, kill them. Americans said, no, we don't do things that way. We're going to give them a fair trial. We're going to have them state their case. And we want the world to see and know what the truth was. When I came on the scene, it was when the International Military Tribunal was completing its case against Hermann Goering and all the other top Nazis. My assignment was that the Americans had decided that they were going to have 12 additional trials. I had researchers, these were former German refugees, most of them. And I said, look, we were doing doctors' case. Where were the doctors' headquarters? Which doctors were involved? You go into their office, into their place, see what correspondence you've got. Bring me anything that looks like it's important. And we did the same with the rest of them. And the one guy who I had assigned to do the SS job, a very bright boy from Switzerland, he came and he said, look what I found. And he just came in and he showed me a big batch of papers, and these were Ereignismeldungen aus der UdSSR, situation reports from the Eastern Front. And there, each Einsatzgruppen commander had sent a report to Berlin, which was the concentration point, the Gestapo headquarters, and they would consolidate them. They would send it out to all the top areas in the German hierarchy. Those who said later we didn't know anything about it. Bullshit, mister. Don't tell that to me. They had the reports. With that in hand, I took the next plane down from Berlin to Nuremberg, where the trials were being prepared. International Military Tribunal against Goering was already winding up, and Telfer Taylor, who was in charge of the subsequent proceedings, as they were called. And I said, we have to put on a new trial. He said, we can't put on a new trial, Ben. He said, the lawyers are all assigned. We got 12 cases. We have gotten the approval of the Pentagon. I can't go back now and ask them, I want to put on a whole new trial. And I got quite indignant about that. And I said, I have in my hand mass murder on an unparalleled scale. You're not going to tell me we're going to let these bastards go. So he said, well, can you do it in addition to your other work? I said, sure. Okay, he said, you do it. Okay. So there it was. Voila. The appointment as the chief prosecutor in what turned out to be the biggest murder trial in human history.
And you were the youngest chief prosecutor, and it was your first trial at all. I read some literature about your approach to the trial, and all the analysts were very impressed with the way you built it up. But before we come back to the trial, I wanted to ask one more question about the evidence you collected. You were one of the first persons who was in many concentration camps. You saw all the evidence because the Germans were very detailed in how they documented everything. Lots of people who lived back in that time in Austria and Germany, they say, but we just didn't know. Do you think that was even possible that someone would have not known it?
Depends what crimes you're talking about. You could not possibly have been a resident anywhere in Germany without having heard Hitler say that he wants to wipe out the Jews. Having been there for Kristallnacht, see him do it in every town, have seen the boycott of the Jewish front, have seen the Jewish merchants and the lawyers disappear. Nobody can say he didn't know. That is an absolute phony excuse. They didn't want to know that we having our troops going out and murdering thousands of Jewish children and thousands of other people. And that's why it was a Geheime Reichssache. But it was not a Geheime Reichssache for the guys who were doing the killings. And they certainly wrote home to their wives and saying, boy, we had a good day today. We killed so many Jews and so many others. So that is a very lame excuse that they didn't know. If they were deaf, dumb, and blind and were someplace else, maybe they didn't know. But if they were in Berlin and were alive and had an eyes to see and a brain to think, they knew very well what was happening. All of them.
When you became the chief prosecutor of the Einsatztruppen case, you had to select 22 people to sit on the bench as a symbol for what they have done. I think there were more than 3,000 people at the Einsatzgruppe, but you had to select 22 of them. How did you manage that?
I was preparing the opening statement in Nuremberg, and I said, how do you balance the scales of justice? 1 million young people murdered, and I can only have 23 defendants in the dock. I thought, well, the first law was suppose you chop them up into 1 million pieces and feed them to the dogs. That's symbolic. And I didn't stay with that very long. I said that would be what they would deserve, really, but it doesn't get us anywhere. And I thought, if I could establish a rule of law which would guard and protect everybody, that would be worthwhile. I thought, well, I'm going to ask this court. I'm not going to tell the court, chop them up in 1 million pieces and feed them to the dogs. That was just really a passing thought. I'm going to ask the court to render a judgment that anybody who does this sort of crime, killing children and husbands and grandfathers and grandmothers and anybody else you might suspect, is committing a crime against humanity. And humanity should have the right to step in. So in my opening statement, which I remember still quite well, although I'm now past 100 years and I was only 27 then, I said, vengeance is not our goal, nor do we seek a just retribution. The case we present is a plea of humanity to law. And I asked the court to affirm by international criminal law the right of all people to live in peace and dignity, regardless of their race or creed. And I closed the opening statement saying these men were the cruel executioners whose terror wrote the blackest page in human history. Life was their toy and death was their tool. If these men be immune, then law has lost its meaning, and we must all live in fear. That was what I asked the court for. I did not suggest any death penalty to anybody, but I wanted a rule of law that would protect everybody. And I got pretty much what I asked for.
If if we look at the accused you had to face, no one of them really showed remorse. How was it for you to see that you present them with all this evidence of what they did and they would not show remorse or an understanding of wrongdoing?
One of the biggest disappointments of my service in Germany was that nobody ever came up to me and said, "Hey, Ben, you're Jewish. I'm sorry what we did to the Jews." Nobody, not one person. My lead defendant was Dr. Otto Ollendorf. I picked him out as the lead defendant because he was a general in the SS. He had 5 children. He was a handsome man, and I was sure he was going to hang because when confronted with the evidence and said, "You admit to Herr Ollendorf, that your unit under your direct command murdered 90,000 Jews," and he said, "No." So what do you mean, no? This is your report. Geheimer Reichsache, you sent it to Berlin. It's not true. Well, he said, the men like to brag about the body count. And so, probably an exaggerated figure. What would you say, 60,000 or 70,000? Yeah, that would be pretty good. So he had admitted that his unit committed 60,000. He was a sure dead duck. So I went down to see him after the sentencing. I never wanted to talk to any of my defendants before the trial. I had their evidence. It was the best evidence there is. A contemporaneous document, top secret, sent to their highest order, marked Geheimer Reichsache. I don't need any witnesses. I went down and I talked to him. And I had never talked to any of my defendants outside of the courtroom during the trial. And I talked to him because he had been fairly honest. I recognized that the Nazis were not all devils with fangs or hair. And he had 5 children. I thought he might say, "Well, tell my kids, my wife, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get into the..." He didn't say that. He said, "You'll see I was right." Hey, mister, wait a minute. 60, 70,000 Jews killed. You think you're right? Yeah, he said, "Look, Hitler said we were going to be attacked by the Russians. And Hitler knew more than I did. And I was in no position to challenge him. And I have good Achten from very distinguished German Nazi lawyers saying that if you know you're going to be attacked, you can strike first. And it's self-defense. And it's not a crime." He said, "I was acting in self-defense." Well, the judges, following my lead, said that's no defense. You go out and kill a lot of innocent people that you don't even know. And then you say, "I'm doing it in self-defense." That's baloney.
If you look back to your life and what you have achieved, and you have achieved so lot, what would you say we could learn from you? What could one person do?
You can do a lot. I put that question to myself. I met with a very distinguished Israeli lawyer, he happened to be, and he said, "Ben, we appreciated your work for the Nazi victims. You did a terrific job there. We hate to see you go." I said, "I want to get the United States to accept an international criminal court." He said, "It's a noble goal, but you won't succeed. The United States will never accept it." I said, "You're probably right. However, I'm going to do it anyway because I know I'm right. I would have to find a formula which is easily understood. People like a slogan. So it didn't take me long to say, law, not war. 3 words. Law, not war. And if you think about it, if you have a choice of going to war or settling it by peaceful means only as required by the UN Charter, if you decide on war, you must be crazy. I mean, in today's world, they say I'm crazy. I say you're crazy, not me. And it seems to me absolutely so stupid to still stick with the ancient days when little David, he threw a rock and killed a Goliath and hit him in the head, and David became the king. So if you want to just throw a rock at the president, go ahead. But the next war is not going to be just throwing a little rock. The next war is going to be wiping out you, not me. I'm going to be taking care of the devil. Give them the slogan, and then I have my wind-up slogan. I will give you something which is very important. 3 things. 1, never give up. 2, never give up. 3,
never give up.
Never give up, right? And the audience comes along with me. And I must say, I've been very gratified with the response I've had from young people all around the world who say you're right. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. The Israeli lawyer you told you would probably not achieve, he was wrong in some way, because in 2002 the International Criminal Court did start to operate. Unfortunately, the US withdrew their signature. But after you fought decades on this particular institution, what are your thoughts on the ICC today? Because there is quite a bit of critique of double standards and not doing enough with the ICC. But if you look at it from your very own perspective, do you think there's a chance that it will flourish at some point?
I will give you my clear answer to it. It's not an easy question because it's up and down stuff. I consider the ICC my baby because I was talking about we need an international court. If we want to have a peaceful world, you have to first define what is permissible and what is not. Aggression should be a crime. I wrote a 2-volume book defining international aggression. So, well, after you have, who is going to decide? You can't have the people who are contestants themselves decide it. Each side thinks they're right. You have to have an independent judge, as the UN Charter provided. There, you need a court, an independent, fair court, and not just hang everybody court. And then you need effective enforcement. We haven't even started with effective enforcement. So I'm perfectly aware of the difficulties, but I'm also very much encouraged. So I'm thankful to you and to any of the others who think I'm right. And if they think I'm right, jump in. Never give up.
It's really something that always comes back to my mind is what can we do? We promised at some point never again. And I mean, genocide and mass murder happened after the same World War on a different scale, but they happened. But for me, the question is, what can we really do if we live in a society where tendencies are there, like right-wing tendencies, anti-Semitism, racism? What can we do to prevent it?
You can emphasize the human obligation of human beings. And I think we have an obligation before we use force to try to compromise whatever the differences are. And this requires a change of heart, a recognition that other human beings are entitled to be treated as human beings. Also, that if they don't do that, they're going to have another Berlin, another Hiroshima, and other things. They're going to destroy the human race as an inhabitant of planet Earth. I wrote a little book called Planethood, and the gist of it was the time for nationhood and neighborhood is over. We have to think in planetary terms. We are all inhabitants of one small planet. And whatever hits that planet, we should deal with in a planetary way. Pandemic is a good example of that. We're not prepared to deal with it. We say the Russians started, the Chinese started, and we're not prepared. And we should think of the planet as a place. Does it have enough food and water to supply for a population which it has or can grow into it? And it certainly can. We can't all have a big Mercedes, but You can live like a human being already if you want to do it. But if you don't want to share it, you want to lock them all out. There are a bunch of Mexican drugs for pushes, you know, some argument like that. So we have to remember our humanity and forget the rest.
Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's a pleasure talking to you and listening to you, and also learning from you.
Spread
Thank
the
you
word.
so much.